morning. We will call the October 3rd work session to order. I'd ask everyone. Thank you. Item 2.1.
Cultural assessment update by Plaza. We have Chris Jordan's.
And being intentional within the parameters of the law of reaching out to small business enterprises to encourage things like that.
Those will be part of our recommendations,
Okay.
but absolutely. Now, we didn't look at that as part of this scope. This was just really for culture and then for your workforce practices. But that will be kind of, as we think about the next level and where you want to see where your baseline is, that would be one of the areas for sure.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions.
Other questions? Got a question about the over time. This is under initial recommendations continued. Over time, replace diversity, equity, and inclusion team as equal employment opportunity investigators. That's a very aggressive word to me, investigators. If we're trying to get people to trust this process and everything else, why was that title chosen?
Oftentimes that's the title that's used for that kind of a role, but I agree with you that that's not a great word, so we can absolutely change that. But right now it's really getting at the, kind of the realm of the work that they're focused on. So much of their time is spent doing a lot of that kind of work. And so we can definitely change that word for sure. But our major recommendation there is that they're really able to kind of elevate out of looking at those kinds of complaints and really bringing forth DEI into the city.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
3.1.
Accept gas utility easement from Center Connect Development 2 LLC for the construction, installation, and maintenance of a gas utility facility on parcel described as parcel ID 302618008000000001B.
Good morning, Council. Alex Leon, I'm Engineering Manager for Clearwater Gas. This easement is looking for your acceptance for a 5-foot wide easement within this property to serve a commercial property for multiple businesses.
Any questions? So the yellow line is the easement?
I don't have it in front of me, but yes, typically we highlight it in yellow and red, but yes, it'll show the easement going around the property on this specific.
It just looks like a very inefficient way to do it.
Okay.
I was just curious. I mean, do you need it on the entire circumference of the property?
Right, so we have multiple businesses that have committed to having gas. So normally we would only come one way and expand as we need to, but at this time we have one roughly in the middle, one at the end of it, so we connected the loop to finish the loop out.
Okay.
Also, the properties over time, they grow in different types of businesses, so it allows opportunities for other ones to come in.
Any other questions? Consent? 3.2.
Authorized purchase orders of Burt Lowe Supply Company of Lakeland, Florida, Devtech Sales, Inc. of Avon Park, and Timpanco, Inc. of Orlando, Florida.
Good morning, Mayor, Council members, City Manager Jennings. My name is Tony McGannis, Gas Superintendent. These materials are to be utilized for meter sets and piping owned by the commercial and residential patrons we serve. Burt Lowe, Devtech, and Timpanco were the most responsive and lowest bidders or providers. Each are being awarded line items and are identified within your agenda packets. And if you have any questions, I would gladly answer those questions.
Any questions?
I just need some clarification.
Sure.
Just help me understand. So this is a contract for products, right? Galvanized
Materials,
pipes. So just clarify for me why we're having an option for 1 or 2 year renewals, because I'm not perceiving this as a service contract, but rather a contract for supplies. So if you can just clarify that for me.
So these materials, when they go out to bid, they get the lowest available pricing. And if our providers can maintain those pricing or are within the margins that the city seems to accept for increases due to outside factors, they have the opportunity to roll that pricing to additional times.
So this is a method to lock in the prices at
Yes,
this time?
ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
Consent?
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Hi, Tony.
Morning, how are you?
Good, thanks. No small business enterprises applied, looking at the bid tabulation. And also, no one in Pinellas applied, or does this work? I'm just thinking about keeping it local.
So the providers' corporate offices are outside Pinellas, but the actual true providers are local.
Okay,
And then I believe Timpaco, because I'm more familiar with Timpaco, I believe is a minority-owned, is a female-owned organization.
okay, great, thanks.
Consent? 3.3.
Thank you, have a good day.
Thank you, Tim.
Accept the gas utility easement from Clearwater Tides for real property located at 880 North Osceola Avenue.
Good morning, Alex Leon, Engineer Manager for Clearwater Gas. Once again, this is an easement, looking for your acceptance for a 5-foot easement through this property, around the property, to provide residential gas for 8 townhomes.
Any questions? Consent?
Yes.
Yep.
3.4.
Accept the gas utility easement from Elevate Safe Point LLC for property located at 1555 Union Street.
Once again, similar as well, 5-foot easement through the property. This will be a residential community, again, townhomes as well, anywhere from gas ranges to water heaters.
Any questions? Consent?
Yes.
4.1. Thank you.
Authorize a guaranteed maximum price proposal to Sturgis Builders, Inc. for repairs and renovations to Beach Walk.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Item before you today is the renovation and refurbishment of the Beach Walk Promenade on the east and the west sides of Gulf Boulevard, from the Opal Sands on the south to Pier 60 on the north. It has been 8 years since we did any renovations of Beach Walk, and basically 16 years since the inception of Beach Walk. This proposal we will refurbish all of the hardscapes that are there simply by removing all the contaminants. We will pressure wash it. We'll seal the concrete walkways and the structures, which include the light bollards and also the seat walls that are out there. We will seal all of that. The ceiling will usually go for 3 to 4 years, so we'll be doing just the ceiling again. Also involved in this will be the replacement of many of the amenities that are out there, the water fountains, the showers, the benches that are also included there. The wayfinding signage will be redone. There are shade structures that are out there that will also be refurbished with new shade structures. The lighthouse towers, I think in front of the Sheridan or somewhere, those will also be painted again. And the ID signs that are basically on the north and the south side when you come in, the lighting on those needs to be repaired. So that's part of this project. It's a 9-month project, and it's to start this month and be completed in June of 2023. While this is not technically a difficult project, it is certainly a time-consuming project. During this time, access to the beach walk, and the businesses and resorts along Beach Walk will all be open. There will be access to them at all times. In order to do this, we have to certainly work closely with the contractor and with all the businesses along that area, and we've developed a detailed, call it a management of pedestrian, MOP, a MOP plan. It's not like an MOT, but similar to it, okay? And the project is divided into 18 different, it's actually 5 sections, but 18 different work areas, which will have their own maintenance of pedestrian plan. Weekly and monthly updates will be available to the public by way of the website, so everyone can keep in touch that way. And it should be noted at the same time, the city staff is going to go in and replace all the landscaping as we do it along the way, because the landscaping has gotten kind of leggy and old, and so we're going to replace that. So when we're done, we'll have hopefully a almost new beach walk. With that, I'm available for any questions you might have.
Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, Art, I thought we weren't going to put 10% contingencies in contracts. I thought we already had that written in somewhere. Because whenever you're talking about a contract and you state you have a 10% contingency, don't they inflate it to meet the contingency?
They usually do not, at least this contractor doesn't. The reason we have this, again, because there are so many items and it's such a long, the length and breadth of the project is enormous. The number of square foot, all of the caulking we have, all of the sidewalks we have, but we have included 10% and are continuing. Now, I know that the attorney was going to look into that I think the reason there is an ability, and
Yes.
engineering might be able to tell us, to put 10% on contracts that are for not everyone, but the contracts for, what I want to say, I'm trying to think of the word, for the CMARs. There is a portion, and the CMARs can put a 10% in there.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere codified or something,
It
we
was,
had that
I
in
think-
there.
It was my question too. I
It was
thought
your
we
question
had-
originally, I think, on another item we had, and it was for products. We put a 10% on top, it was a playground item we had, and we put 10% on top of that to purchase playground equipment. And that's when we took that out, okay? But this has to do with the CMAR contract, and I believe that it's in, someone from engineering or somewhere it might be, or we can get that back to you on that.
Well, I think part of our discussion, Councilmember Albrecht, and I think we had a couple months ago or whatever, was that when you have a 10% contingency, whether it's a product or a service, it's kind of an open door to, you got a nice little buffer there, and if you want to use it, it's already been approved. And so I thought that was more of the conversation we had, that we weren't going to do that. I didn't know if there was a distinction between products and services, but I think to me, it seems wise practice not to have a contingency, especially because our city manager, you can authorize up to 100,000, or did we increase it?
10% of the project.
Oh, just 10% of the whole thing? Okay. I just think that's a little more of a
Mr.
safeguard.
Margolis?
Good. So I apologize, I had to use the men's room for a moment. The contingency discussion, at least as I recall it, was dealing specifically with commodities, with goods. In the ordinance as currently written, there is a contemplation for potential contingencies for construction, just because construction contracts, even ones that are relatively straightforward like this one, can involve a lot of unknowns. But certainly on the commodity side, I would recommend against including any sort of contingency, because that price is already known and it's not going to change, nor should it change. But with this, they could run into something unknown, and that could happen in any construction environment. So to me, the construction environment is very different than any other sort of contract we enter into the city, and I believe that's how it's written currently in the ordinance. I will say, in general, though, it is up to council's discretion in terms of setting the ordinance, and so council has as much freedom as you like to either make contingencies as broadly available or as infrequently available as you like, and to any extent that you like. So that is a policy level discussion for council to have if you're interested.
Other questions? You done, Councilmember Albrecht?
I think so. I'd like to discuss that further at some point.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Well, I mean, could we give direction now that contingencies aren't part of, I don't want to slow down work. I mean, if something goes over and the contractor or supplier needs additional funds, if they've got a direct line to the city manager to authorize it, that seems fine.
I think the issue we have with not just Parks and Recreation, but engineering projects and all the other projects that come before you, if you'll notice, most all of them have 10% in there because they are
Yeah.
construction projects. So it will impact not just these, and the next item you have up also has a 10% in it as well. Again, it's a construction project, so.
It's just another layer of oversight, though, if you have to justify it.
Ms. Kivett, do you want to
It looks like
bite of
it.
the apple?
Okay, good.
Good morning, Tara Kivett, city engineer. In my opinion, as Mr. Margolis said, if we manage it correctly, so staff is key to make it successful. And so I believe it does give us some flexibility, especially for the, new construction is a little different, but the bulk of our projects that we bring to you are renovation related. And so we frequently find things that are unknown. So it gives us a timing issue that we can deal with that. We typically already have established unit prices, so it's not like we're truly paying change order costs. It's frequently an overrun of a quantity. We never just approve them. They are never allowed to move forward with using contingency until they have staff approval. We look at it tightly. We frequently negotiate back and forth with them for a lower price. Sometimes when it is a complicated unknown, we'll even do time and materials. And then we have our construction inspector out there. They document all of that. And I would have to look, but the bulk of our projects are completed under budget in these type of scenarios. So I support including contingency.
Thank you.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yeah, just to follow up, as a retired general contractor, I see it in every contract, and you have to put it in, I understand that, but, and I thought the mechanics of this was the approval process but I didn't think we needed to discuss that. I think it should be in a contract without, I don't know how it would be, if the 10% is something, and that's, the percentage is in line with what most contingencies are. But I don't know why it has to keep coming to us to approve a 10% contingency. It should be something that maybe just automatically put in on any kind of capital projects or something.
Actually, it is written into the contract. Or it is, go ahead.
Correct. No, Art is correct. You're approving the contract as a whole. They're just pointing out that it includes a 10% contingency to be very transparent. And like I said, even our front-end documents, our construction specifications, state in Section 3 that the city has to approve use of the contingency. It's not just a blanket.
Well, that was my suggestion, that I wanted to talk further about this so I could get all the details. I'm sure there are mechanics behind there that protect you on the 10%. We're not just throwing it out there saying, we're approving this much, but you can get this much. So
you're approving the total contract, and that this item is just being specific that there is a 10% contingency.
Okay.
So Art does not have to come back to you to use that contingency. That's at staff level.
But there's still accountability from
Yes.
staff
Yes.
with the contractor, and we're not just
To release it.
handing over 10%. Was there any discussion about spending a little more and accelerating the project? 9 months is a significant amount of time, obviously. It runs in and through spring break. I was curious if there was any discussion of that.
Yes, one of the reasons that it is so long, and we don't believe that it will be that long, but there are times when we'll completely pull off. For example, during the Christmas season, the 2 or 3 weeks there, we're going to ask them to leave. We're also going to ask the contractor at times, for any special event that is held on the beach, so that they won't be there to interfere with that. So they basically have to move up and reset, during those times. That was one of the reasons for the length of it. But I do understand your question. We can certainly see if they can get some additional help during that time. But there are a lot of components here. I mean, we're sending off, you take shower towers down, go get them painted. They got to come back, and most of it is just on the ground, cleaning, so to speak.
And how was the staging determined? Because I was a little surprised the east side are some of the first phases. I would think we'd want to get the entire west side completed before spring break, because that seems to be the more traveled side.
Correct. The reason we started on the east side was we have some, the seat walls have a longer span. It'll take almost 2 to 3 months to get them manufactured. And so we didn't want to start basically on the west side, but not having those available to fix during that time when we were in those sections. So we started on the east side because there's not the seat walls that we have to replace on that side. That's the only reason why. We will jump quickly. Actually, there are three basically sections over there that we will do on the east side. Then we jump back to the west side.
Mm-hmm.
And we will work on the west side coming through.
Okay. Any other questions? Consent?
Yep.
4.2.
Cater, Deputy Director, Parks and Recreation. The council recently approved a third quarter amendment to add $600,000 for a capital project to renovate the city cemetery. This proposal is part of that overall cemetery refurbishment. It includes the repair and resurfacing of the asphalt roads within the cemetery. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cater? Vice Mayor?
I just had a brief question. As I was looking at this agenda item and then going back to our DEI discussion and presentation at the beginning. So we have approved 13 construction managers at risk for continuing contracts. So my question is, are any of them owned by women or minorities? Thinking about DEI, can we be intentional here and perhaps break some of this work down into smaller pieces to allow local business owners to come in and do the work? Just wanted to.
I'm sure they
Put that out
can.
there.
These 13 that we have now, I think we go out every 2 or 3 years to the
To
community to get new contractors on that list. So we were just using those that are currently.
Right,
on the list.
approved.
Yes.
And I would say that I've spoken with staff about adding additional CMARs to the list. It is a fairly lengthy process, and it's very staff involved, but staff does understand our desire to make sure we're inclusive going forward.
Yes.
I was just thinking about breaking that job into, if we broke it into the asphalt part of just laying the asphalt, there might be a local small business that could do that.
Understood.
Any other questions? Consent?
Yep.
5.1.
Approve an event license agreement between Jones Lang LaSalle Americas in its capacity as the agent for the premises known as Countryside Mall.
Good morning, Michael Wallach, Deputy Chief of Police. This agreement has allowed us the ability to host a shred and prescription drug take-back event on October 29th, 2022 from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Countryside Mall, located at 27011 U.S. Highway 19 North. This event requires us to complete a use agreement with Jones Lang LaSalle Americas, Inc., which is the managing group for the mall, and this agreement includes an indemnity clause, therefore it has to come before council. The police legal advisor has reviewed and approved this document. Chief Slaughter recently brought a similar document to you guys in reference to National Night Out, which is October 4th. The managing entity of this property was able to get approval for both at the same time, so that's why we're back here today. I can answer any questions.
Any questions? Both great events. Thank you for putting them on. Consent?
Thank you.
Thank you. 6.1.
Approve the request from Peace Memorial Presbyterian Church, the owner of the property address 110 Southport Harrison Avenue, to vacate a portion of the 28-foot wide platted alley right-of-way.
Good morning, Suzanne Kramer, Real Estate Services Coordinator. The purpose of this vacation is to accommodate improvements to the handicap ramp and covered entrance to the building, as well as prevent dangerous through traffic in the alley. There are city and private utilities in the alley, so utility easements will be reserved for the city and for private utilities, as well as a pedestrian ingress and egress easement over and across the entire vacated alley in favor of the general public. City staff have reviewed the vacation and have no objection.
Any questions?
No.
We'll hear that on Thursday. 6.2.
Approve the request from the City of Clearwater, owner of property address 300 Cleveland Street, to vacate the 18-foot wide drainage and utility easement.
Okay, this vacation is intended to clear title on the last remaining easement on the old Harborview parcel by the city to formally vacate our interest. Clearing title is intended to allow for subsequent conveyance and development of the parcel. There are no city utilities present within the easement, and city staff have no objection to the vacation.
Any questions? All right, we'll hear that Thursday. 6.3.
Approve the request from the owner of property address 3273 Beaver Drive to vacate the south 5 feet of the 10-foot wide platted utility and drainage easement.
Okay, the purpose of this vacation is to allow for a swimming pool that was constructed in the easement back in 1979, and it is preventing the seller from closing on the property. There are no city utilities present within the easement. City staff have reviewed the vacation and have no objection.
Any questions? We're going to make the homeowner happy.
Very.
All right, 6.4.
Accept a sidewalk easement from HLS S3 Clearwater LLC for the installation, repair, maintenance, and replacement of a sidewalk.
Okay, the sidewalk easement will allow the city rights for installation, repair, maintenance, and replacement of a sidewalk as this site is being developed for commercial use. The city engineering department does recommend acceptance of the easement.
Any questions? Thank you. 7.1.
Approve purchase orders from multiple vendors and provide funding for the acquisition of library books and materials.
Good morning, Tony Potters. I'm the lead librarian for the acquisition system here at the library. The library would like to request approval for the library's 3 largest vendors for the upcoming year. The amount requested is $485,000 to provide materials for all the library branches here in Clearwater. With the funding, the library would purchase a wide array of popular materials for the public. We would purchase best-selling fiction and nonfiction books for our patrons. The funding will also provide access to electronic books on Overdrive, Hoopla, Canopy, and Freebill. These applications allow Clearwater patrons access to ebooks, downloadable devices, movies, audiobooks from their home and from their apps. We would purchase children's books, graphic novels for kids and teenagers to enjoy. The funding also provides for the latest Blu-ray and DVD movie releases, electronic games, audiobooks, and CD music. We also purchase additional formats such as large print books, Spanish language books, magazines, newspapers, reference databases for research, special collections, and local history materials for Clearwater. We are members of the Mid-Atlantic Library Alliance, and we do receive substantial purchasing discounts through this alliance. ALIA is a consortium of 246 libraries in the Mid-Atlantic region, and many of our contracts are through this alliance.
Any questions? Consent? Thank you. Happy purchasing. 8.1.
Authorize an increase on purchase orders for Quorum Services, Joe Payne, Inc., and Nova Engineering and Environment, LLC, for building inspection plan review services.
Good morning, I'm Kevin Garrett, Web Planning and Development. The item is to increase the purchase orders that we have for outside contractual services for plan review and inspections.
Any questions for Mr. Garriott?
Just a simple one. So this increase is due to the vacancies of the city staff?
Well, it's due to vacancies, and also the purchase orders that we did were just before pandemic. And when pandemic hit, we didn't really know what was going to happen. Are we going to have anything to do? Are we going to be here? Are we not going to be here? And lo and behold, the increase in permits and work just was crazy. We would have never expected that. I think everybody in town has taken out their bathtub and put in a new shower and redone their bathroom and redone their kitchen and made offices. And so we've had an increase in numbers of permits and revenue and inspections and plans review and absolutely everything.
Is the trend the same, or is it starting to slow with interest rates? And
knock on wood,
things?
it's holding. It's staying up, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Albritton.
How are we doing on the permit approvals time-wise? Are we still?
Well, that's one reason that we do this, so that we can keep our time frame reasonable. And we have stuck to our goals all through the pandemic, and we've mostly made it. We're behind it a little bit, but not that bad.
Are you considering opening the building department back again as it was before pandemic?
As of today, yes, we are.
As of today? Okay.
Timely question.
Very good.
Any other questions? Consent? 9.1. Thank you, Mr. Carrion.
Authorize a purchase order to Frontier for the installation and operation of wireless internet services.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Dan Mayer, IT Director. This item is for the installation of public Wi-Fi, publicly accessible Wi-Fi in the downtown area. It'll stretch from Cleveland Street from Osceola to Myrtle. This will provide us the opportunity to give people access to information, but also includes a communication platform that allows us to see who is logged onto the network and to share information with them. Specifically, this will tie into the Imagine project when it's fully built. And we thought it was a good decision to test it in this environment for a period of time prior to that build-out. And we know there are other technologies at work, and it may not be sustainable by itself for the long haul, but we thought it's a good add, and certainly gives us some leverage in terms of communication and promotion of the area. Yes, sir.
Councilmember Albrecht.
So this has kind of been tossed around for a while, this whole idea of lighting up the downtown, and I guess mainly for the people on the street, but mostly for businesses too. Is this just for the street lighting up, or are you doing something with bandwidth?
It is not designed. Technically, we're not allowed to resell bandwidth from providers, so this is free. Businesses could choose, but we're not under a service level obligation in the way this is structured. So it is not a commercial venture to provide bandwidth services to commercial operations. It's for free public use.
So for this amount, $425, what are they installing?
3 years. So in this area, one of the reasons we want this route is the construction of the downtown corridor is complete, and it's all pavers, and probably maybe a cheaper way would be to put our own fiber in, but we would tear up a lot of sidewalks in the process, and we didn't want to do that. There's a limited number of vendors that we have that maintain that infrastructure. We thought a good test was to use wireless technology, and Frontier is one of the best in the area for that. So we're paying a little bit more for this as opposed to tearing up the sidewalks in downtown, because we have to tear up at every street pole.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Jennings.
This item also presents an opportunity for sponsorship, which is one of the reasons why we're bringing this forward, is we believe that with the park coming online next June, that as all of you know, we are seeking sponsorships in the park and also at the amphitheater. We see this as really a great opportunity for a company to want to sponsor the downtown Wi-Fi, therefore mitigating the costs to the city. So I worked closely with Dan on this agenda item. He's done a terrific job in laying out what really the equipment that needs to happen in the park, but also along Cleveland Street. And our hope is to expand this out to East Gateway as well. But this was kind of the pilot that we wanted to do to see how it works. Dan also mentioned that there's newer technologies that are coming. They're not quite here yet, and so this is potentially an interim step, but it does give us an opportunity to provide, I think, a vital service for our residents and businesses in the downtown.
Vice Mayor.
Does this come out of our ARPA fund, our ARPA bucket for broadband expansion? No?
It's coming out of one of my CIPs.
Okay.
For construction. Yeah, we worked with the Superlative Group through the Parks and Rec. Chris Koch has worked with them closely on all the sponsorship opportunities. We presented the solution to them and asked what they thought the revenue potential was. So the number I referenced was 150 annually, which would be the top end. There's 2 different advertising opportunities on the sign-on process. Plus, we can promote businesses downtown with it. We'll be able to see who is logged on. When you accept the use of the Wi-Fi, it gives us permission to send you text messaging for a period of time. We could say, please visit, the downtown businesses after the show. Maybe you get a discount. I could share vital information if there was problem or we have to change traffic. So there are things that we think it brings from a value and communication standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see if it works. We hope it does.
Consent?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 10.1.
Update on Beach Marina Dock and Utilities Replacement Project.
Mr. Gandy has his hands.
Yes, he does.
Morning, Mayor, Council. Eric Gandy, Aviation Director. Interestingly enough, we're here today to discuss, provide an update on the Marina project, redevelopment project. And we're talking with the team here out in the hallway, and it's not lost what occurred in South Florida and all the images we've been seeing about marinas and vessels. So it's a little bit awkward timing for such a presentation, but it's the reality we're in. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the purpose here today. It's to bring you up to speed on what was authorized back in last October, design and permitting of new marina out at Clearwater Beach. But it's really a twofold session. It's the presentation and its request to integrate a design of a parking garage into that project. And I'll broach that topic in more detail subsequent to the presentation. But I think during the course of the presentation, you'll recognize some of the compromises that we have to make, understanding that much of what we have in the existing marina can't exist in today's environment because of permitting and overwater structures and things of that nature. So it's just something to be mindful of, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the history out there. I think most of you got the initial presentation, but the marina was built in the 50s. It's had updates over the years. The building is the original building, but the docks have been rebuilt on several occasions. The latest rebuild was in the 70s and then early 80s. The city's been trying to get that marina rebuilt since '05, and they had a plan to rebuild just the overwater structures in '05, and that was about $8 million in 2005 money. This is a much more ambitious plan because we recognize we have utility issues out there because they're the same age, if not older, than some of the structures. So the design team was chosen, and this council authorized them to move forward. That was a team of Moffitt and Nickel. I have Nicole Pauley here today to give you the presentation, and then she and I will remain at the podium and be prepared to answer any questions related to the project, and I'll segue into why the parking garage is part of this discussion today. Oh.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm Nicole Pauley with Moffitt & Nickel, the lead design firm for this project. My background's in marine structural engineering and marina planning. So when we were first scoping this project with the city, these are the goals that they conveyed to us. We need to replace the aging existing timber dock infrastructure with floating docks and to replace and modernize the existing utilities. In doing so, optimize the marina slip mix and the layout to expand the marina further to the south to maximize the city-owned submerged lands, but also to maintain the existing slip count and the balance between the recreational and commercial vessels. Some of the structures can no longer be located on the docks for permitting requirements, and so we needed to find upland storage and ticket sales opportunities for these different commercial operators. And there was also a request to replace the sidewalk in an attempt to reduce the congestion along Coronado, where the ticket booths are located there. Bottom right of this photo shows it well. And also to activate Marina Walk, which is what we're calling, informally at least, the area that connects to Beach Walk and runs along the Marina waterfront. There was also a request to accommodate 2 water taxi boat slips in the marina in an attempt to get a Pinellas County grant. So So I think everybody knows the project area, but the area hatched in yellow is pretty much the city-owned submerged lands. That's the southern boundary. Does extend further to the east, but there's a channel there. So there's currently 165 slips, and we're looking to maintain that. You'll also see there's an area hatched in red up towards the top here, and that is the sidewalk replacement and some of the areas we're proposing for to support some of the storage and ticket kiosk opportunities. So at the start of the project, we completed a marina market study to look at the market and come up with a slip mix for this project. We also completed some commercial tenant outreach. And we did field work, geotechnical engineering, surveying, and some marine resource study, a couple of field assessments, and all of that went into the development of a marina master plan. Upon completion of that in March, we attended the Marine Advisory Board meeting and also a BPRC meeting to review the project. And following that, we initiated the environmental permitting. We attended pre-application meetings with the agencies, and we have initiated permitting with Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the Army Corps at this time, and that process is ongoing. We also applied for a transient boating grant. And the city has put together an RFQ for selection of a construction manager at risk. And so right now, permitting is ongoing, and 30% design we paused temporarily on and hope to continue that this month. And then following that, 60% design and 100% design. Then the construction manager will select a bid and will hopefully begin construction. So throughout this process, we're going to highlight a couple of risks we've identified in the project, can talk about them in more detail after the fact, and one of them is that we recognize that there is a parking challenge out at the Clearwater Beach, and this project does propose a slight parking reduction of about 40 spaces, and also a portion of the existing marina was built within the federal channel, and so there is a petition to deauthorize a segment of the federal channel to continue this project. Dredge disposal, the existing material is very lightweight and mucky, which is difficult to handle, and so we're looking for an opportunity and a location where that can be barged and handled and disposed of so it doesn't have to be handled on site. There's some minor contaminants in it that make things like a park a difficult question, so identifying a dredge disposal location is a risk that we need to work through. And then you probably see this on all of your presentations, but inflation and supply chain issues continue to plague the construction industry, and so we are doing what we can to mitigate and plan for those risks. So a quick summary on the marina market study. We did prepare a report for this, but briefly to summarize, we looked at both what we call the geographic market, which is the area that's in close driving distance to the marina, and a demographic market where we looked at destination marinas that expand a little bit outside of that. It's more of a focus on transient boaters or people that are coming in from outside. We also looked at marinas that were at least 100 slips, because there's a lot of smaller and residential and private marinas around here that we didn't consider as part of a slip mix discussion. And like I mentioned, location relative to a population center like Sarasota, Bradenton, St. Pete were all locations as well as Clearwater. So what we identified across the board is there's high occupancy, there is demand for boat slips, and there are wait lists in many locations. Highest demand is on boats that are greater than 40 feet, and a lot of that is because that boats are moving into dry stack and or being trailered and kept at their houses a lot these days. We also evaluated the market rates, and the average market rate for this region for this type of marina was $19 per foot per month for a long-term lease and $2 to $3 per foot per day for a transient rate. We also considered dock construction, and if we look around the facilities in Clearwater in the geographic market, we do see predominantly fixed timber docks, but if you look at the destination marinas and the newer marinas, they're predominantly floating, which is the trends that we're seeing nationally. So Clearwater's 165 slips are a balance of recreational, commercial, and transient slips, and they're all in high demand. generally trying to keep that balance, to keep all of those slip counts similar between types and uses. There is a demand for larger slips, and so the existing marina has about 70% of slips less than 50 feet. We are looking to take that 70% and shift it a little bit higher into more the 40 to 70 foot range. There will still be smaller slips, there will be larger slips, but that's kind of the sweet spot range from the market study. And there's a table off to the right that kind of splits that, that range down. That was what we were targeting in our design. When it comes to slip rates, the Clearwater marinas are below market average, and when this marina is reconstructed, there is an opportunity to ask for more if you're interested. Honestly, the on-site amenities that you guys have here are great. You're right next to the beach. You have all kinds of upland restaurants, activities, and so the only amenities that we felt were really outdated were the actual structure and the utilities at this place. So we conducted some commercial tenant outreach. We did a virtual survey that almost every commercial tenant responded to. We also did a couple of in-person work sessions with about 10 of them to get some feedback on a few of the initial plans that we had put together. We did have some, one-off comments and specific requests from different people, but these are a summary of things that we heard from a bunch of the commercial operators. And that is that they want to locate the commercial slips in highly visible locations. They really want to remain along the perimeter of the marina to maximize walk-up traffic and visibility. The west half of the marina is the most desirable. They get all of the pedestrians walking up through Beach Walk, and so that is the most desirable spot, so those boaters tend to want to stay there. They expressed that point of sale and storage at or near their slip is very important. Different types of operators prefer different things, but generally the tour boats and sightseeing and dinner cruise, they all really want to have a ticket kiosk near them, and then there's a lot of ice machines for the fishing and the dinner cruise and stuff, and so we're constantly looking for opportunities to provide as much of that as we can on site and nearby. A comment that we actually didn't ask that was written in frequently was parking, and so parking is a challenge and additional parking is desired. And also fixed docks were generally preferred over floating docks for the commercial team. Taking all that information, this is the master plan that we developed for the project, and so we maintained the 165 slips and the balance between the recreational and the commercial, and transient for this purpose is grouped under recreational because there's some flexibility to change that around. Focusing on the water side first, we were able to keep all of the commercial tenants around the perimeter of the marina. That's the colored slip size bubbles that go around the perimeter here. Those are the commercial slips locating a lot of the tour boats to the west and some of the larger boats to the east, with the recreational slips in the center, and then the fuel dock down at the bottom right page there. We're extending everything down. That dotted line at the bottom is the city-owned submerged land, so we are maximizing that. Turning to the upland, this is a marina project, but the upland portion of the project becomes very critical for how do we tie into the sidewalks, how do we provide some of these upland storage opportunities, ticket sales, and overall, how do we provide some better connectivity to really activate the east side of this marina basin? Because we got some consistent feedback that everyone stops at the west, nobody continues down to the east side. So what we wanted to do is provide a connected path throughout this whole area, connecting the east side up and around to the bike trail and making a loop through this facility, as well as making sure that crosswalk off a causeway comes straight down and connects in. And then we have some ideas, I'll show you some enlarged sections here in a second, where to try to focus the operations on the east and the west sides of the marina building to tailor to the different types of commercial operators. So this is the west promenade and plaza that we're calling it. So this is between Beach Walk and the marina building. We are expanding the sidewalk, and this is we're proposing to plan to remove approximately 40 parking spaces, to make a wider sidewalk and provide opportunities for ticket kiosks as little ticket booths around here in this kiosk mall type approach, with a focused entrance point at this area that would serve as both an overlook and an access to the floating docks. What this does is this brings everybody up and around the up Beach Walk and onto Marina Walk, so they get to see all of the boats and they enter from one location. It kind of puts everyone on an even playing field at this side. So in order to provide some of these options, we tried to minimize the least amount of parking we can, but this is the one area where we thought that additional pedestrian space in this plaza type feel would really be appreciated by the community and visitors. Moving to the east side of the building, we are providing a couple of kiosk groups over here. This side was going to be more focused towards fishing and wanted to create kind of a fishing village feel. We want to keep Clearwater's modern feel, but at the same time really give something, give some kind of focus, some Instagram type moment, art piece or something that makes people want to walk down here and see this, and then they watch the fish coming off the boat and being clean, but they're not necessarily getting the fish slapped up on the, promenade right in front of them. That's a bunch of different opportunities to try to draw this down, and we think that shading, seating, art, and making this more of a pathway will help do that. So quickly to summarize, the master plan that was developed does align with the market study results. We did increase some of the commercial slip mix to accommodate a future market. We don't want to design specifically for every boat in that marina, but every commercial boat does have a spot in the marina the way we have it laid out. The boats remain all on the perimeter of the marina where they have requested, and we've got kiosks located upland, closer to the dock entrances. We are providing fish cleaning stations and some limited storage options on the dock, and adjacent to the marina in the building, we're looking at some opportunities to use up a little bit of space there, and some of the art and wayfinding and shade and seating and everything along the creation of Marina Walk, we think will help activate the area. As part of the master plan phase, we developed a opinion of construction cost, and with contingencies and inflation allowances, we ended up at $25.5 million, which does exceed the budget for this project. So we were asked to do a value engineering exercise to look at how to reduce some of the costs closer to the project budget, which is around $19 million. So our first alternative was to take everything and just skinny it up, get rid of some of the niceties, some of the allowances for landscaping, lighting improvements, shrinking down some of the docks to industry minimums, maybe a little bit tight but operational, and overall we were able to cut out $3.5 million without completely getting rid of any features. So that's every slip and everything built, but might feel a little cheap. But functional overall.
Way to sell it.
So alternatives 2 and 3 took kind of a different approach. We actually phased the marina. So we looked at taking a portion of the marina and moving it into a future phase. So this kept everything exactly how it was, but took a section, moved it to a future phase. And so this area, the highest density of commercial boats are on the right side, are the west side of the marina. And so we moved that into the future phase, and we were able to reduce this to $19 million in doing that. But you are leaving aging infrastructure in place that's going to need repairs and long-term maintenance. So this is really just a temporary solution. But we were able to do this, get down to the $19 million, and not lose any slips in the process. The third alternative, we took out one of the recreational dock trees, and this does lose 26 slips of revenue generation, but it impacts a smaller portion, actually allows us to build more of the marina overall. This also got us to $19 million, and it leaves less existing infrastructure in place, but you also lose revenue generation from those 26 slips. So one thing I didn't specifically mention in the initial master plan is that there's an existing seawall that's also aging that was not part of the replacement of this project. So we took a look at what would it take, instead of doing repairs to that wall now and then planning for a replacement in 5 to 10 years, where we have to carefully plan the infrastructure and the height elevation changes and everything to work both now and in the future. We took a look at what replacing the seawall would do, and that would allow us to do a fixed dock option for the commercial tenants, which is something that was requested by them. We could do fixed timber docks, which is what is shown in darker brown there. It would need some ramps and walkways to get up over the elevated bulkhead at this time, but it would also, the higher bulkhead or seawall would also allow us to raise some of these docks up to accommodate sea level rise, because some of them are very low right now. So the floating docks are what is shown in gray, so all the recreational, transient, fuel dock slips and everything would remain floating with ADA compliant gangways down to them, and then the commercial docks would be fixed. Everything upland generally remains the same as the master plan. So we went through this exercise. It was $28 million, and that was another $3 million in seawall repairs, seawall replacement, and some additional dredging because we were getting closer to the wall. And so at this time, my understanding is that we're actually looking back to the original master plan with the all floating option, but we wanted to present all of it for thoroughness. Eric, do you have anything to add?
So I'm going to keep Nicole up here with me. He's got permission to kick me under the table if I say something. So a little history on this. In March and April, I had the initial meetings with the design team, and we had conversations about the budget and where we were, what was anticipated in 2015 and 16 and 17 when we adjusted for this Marina project. And at that time, it was about $15 million penny money was allocated, and then the Marine and Aviation Department was looking to put in about $3 million. So after our first meeting, when I saw the 25 million number, I ran to John and said, we may have a problem. So we had some meetings about it, and the decision was made to have Nicole and her team go through different exercises. Number one, to try and get us within the budget, and at the same time, we were looking with finance to see where we could find additional funding to cover that project. So we had them do a lot of additional work trying to look at phased options, and the problem with the phased options is this, and I have to describe this, and I've used this analogy several times, it's like taking a trailer park and converting it into an apartment complex. You have tenants that are there. And that's why timing of this and these decisions are critically important, and we wanted you to be involved early because it has those impacts. So you still have to mobilize construction, you have to do your dredging, and it's exceedingly disruptive to try and phase that. We do have a phased approach to any of our either the hybrid design or the original concept plan. You have to phase it anyway because part of our understanding is, and you have to be sensitive to the fact that there's over 50 commercial businesses, some of which have been there for generations. And we made a commitment to them that you will be able to operate out of this marina during the course of this project. That's going to be challenging, but we made that commitment understanding that their livelihoods, in some cases, are dependent upon it. So I think, for us, when we looked at that, we looked at the resiliency component, we looked at the budget, and the seawall was when I looked at this, and I had some concerns there, because we're looking at doing this again within 10 years. And the problem we have is we do not have the budget to allow for that hybrid model, which incorporates a seawall replacement and going back with a timber structure for the commercial fleet. And why it's important to them is loading, unloading, passengers, fish, supplies, and they're pretty rough on some of the docks sometimes. And my thought was, and my staff thought, we have skilled trades workers that can fix timber. I got to call a contractor if the concrete's damaged. I mean, there's no way around that. So that was kind of kill two birds with one stone approach. Give the commercial fleet timber docks, allow me to fix timber docks. They have to be elevated anyway, so we still address some of the resiliency sea level rise issue, but it exceeds the budget to the extent that I'm not comfortable with it in this environment at this point in time. And I say that because we have to move this forward, and we have to have kind of a definitive commitment to move it forward. We can't pump the brakes after I've noticed my tenants and they start vacating the slips. And that's my fear, is that the unpredictability of things causes us to have pause and pump the brakes on this thing after I've noticed 110 of the tenants that you got to leave, and they start vacating. Because the supply of wet slips is so limited that there's no place for them to go, and they have to have ample lead time to make those moves. So if I start noticing, 12 months out and they start vacating, our revenue plummets. And if we stop the project subsequent to that, we have a big problem on our hands. So that's why I kind of wanted to engage you guys in that conversation to get a sense of your feel for the project as described. And then secondarily, but equally important, I think Nicole touched on all these things that we tried to accommodate the commercial fleet. The recreational fleet is a different animal. You got folks that may use their boats a couple times a month, some more frequently, most a lot less frequently. They, have a cooler full of supplies, some ice they can put in our carts and wheel down to their vessel. The commercial fleet, we're talking tens of thousands of pounds of ice a week, thousands of pounds of bait, supplies, food, and none of those ice machines, walk-in freezers, sales kiosks, overwater storage locations are permissible now. They can't exist no matter what we come back with. So that's where the parking garage component comes in. As Nicole stated, a lot of the tenants mentioned parking, and I would probably tell you that's the single biggest issue that I hear about in my office is parking. Certain times of the year, my staff and I put cones in front of our parking spaces because people would rather just take the tickets and park in our spots. The demand is high. We have two very large restaurants, a couple smaller ones. Some of these commercial vessels hold hundreds of passengers. And I think if you see there's a little shaded gray area, we've always, in the back of our minds, contemplated a parking garage at the location. And again, I like to be efficient when I can, and the thought process is, well, ground level, you can't put retail restaurants, you can't put anything like that in the ground level. You can put storage down there. You can probably put our ice machines down there. You could accommodate a lot of what we're trying to accomplish for this commercial fleet with the addition of a parking garage to include parking. So I had a meeting with city manager, assistant city manager, engineering and parking manager, and discussed some of these things. And the thought was to speak to you guys about it and determine if you would like us to proceed with a study of that situation and a preliminary design to be either accomplished by this design firm or one of engineering's choosing, to determine how we could integrate the needs of this commercial fleet and our storage needs into a future parking garage at the location. What would have to happen kind of simultaneously is to design components so that the teams speak to one another and get that hammered out to accommodate what our needs are beyond the parking. I will say I did quite a bit of research on this, and I remember conversations about this in 15 and 16. I don't believe any of you were on the council at that time, but I remember it being brought forward, some conversations about it, and then it kind of fell by the wayside. And I think it had a lot to do with the optics and interference with the views over the marina. But, in terms of form over function, I like to focus on function here. We have one of the last working marinas and working waterfronts in the West Coast. And I think, this might be something that we incorporate into it. to determine if that's the direction we want to go at this location. So complicated stuff, a lot of moving parts, trying to make sure we accommodate everyone's needs with multiple user groups involved. But, you know, we have to replace this marina. There's no question about that. It has to be done in a timely manner. The utilities, we're turning the power off several times a month because the water's too high. And of course, we have 150 plus tenants who that impacts them. They have freezers connected. Some have generator interconnects where the generator kicks on, some don't. So it's a problem for our tenants when you have to constantly turn the power on and off because the tides are high. So that's kind of where we are. We're here to answer any questions, and any kind of dialogue and input is beneficial, and then get your kind of direction on this parking garage component.
Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Director Gandy and Deputy Director McDonald. Before Eric assumed the director position, I worked very closely with Michael, and he brought me up to speed on the challenges. The reality is we have a 40 to 50-year-old marina that has not been kept up. We also have issues that we've allowed certain uses over the years that the county would never support and or approve going forward, such as putting ticketing kiosks over water. So the challenge is that we could do a kind of a half-baked approach, but we're going to be back at this within the next 10 years. Or we can really take a look at the addition of a parking structure and really focusing on kind of a P3, a public-private partnership with the garage, in negotiating a much better deal than certainly what we had on the North Marina garage, or the North Beach garage. But these are all very, I mean, we've spent an enormous amount of time going through all of the options. Nicole, you've done a terrific job of really trying to help us with different options. But the reality is that, as Eric just mentioned, we're having to turn the utilities off because we've actually had some impact because of the water. We've had some impact with some of the vessels and their equipment. So I do believe we'll be able to raise fees in the future once we have a 21st century marina. I also I believe that there's an opportunity to have a P3 approach on the garage, but it's essential to have the city council kind of give us direction in this particular area because it is very expensive, much more expensive than what had been approved. But I think at the end, the result will be that we will have a spectacular facility that will last for many years to come.
Has there been any discussion about, because there may have been discussion back in 15, 16, there was discussion back in the early 2000s about where to put parking garage, where the opportunities were. So somewhere down in South Beach by where Opal Sands is, we talked about parking garages at Pier 60, up on North Beach between Frenchies and the Palm, and the Marina. Those were the four big locations. And, none of the ones directly on the beach gained any traction because of view quarters. And the same issue was with the Marina. Have you talked about, first of all, how many spaces would be lost from all the storage and everything else? And how many floors are you contemplating? I know you don't have a design, and maybe Jeremy wants to come up for part of this, but...
So even before this design, we had the parking complaints there, just because of the high utilization. With this design and trying to accommodate the commercial fleet's needs of the sales kiosks and to really address one of their other needs is we need something to draw people to the other end of the marina because location is an issue. So trying to do both of those things, we lost about 40 spaces. I've seen from the 15, 16 preliminary renderings, 3 and 5 level structures, different designs, and I found that the initial kind of PowerPoint, if you will, I found council discussion on it, but I couldn't find anything further, and I didn't know the history beyond that. So I know that they were looking at 3 and 5 stories. We actually have this location because we have underground fuel tanks out there, and we have to be mindful of those. And it provides the potential for that upland storage to be in close proximity to the highest intensity users, which tend to be that fishing fleet and the larger commercial vessels. If you go out there now, there's a walk-in freezer over the water. So they have significant needs, and I think we would run into a situation where if we don't meet those needs in some capacity, they're going to still do business. And is that ice trucks and delivery trucks, and that will further exacerbate the parking problem because they've got to make those deliveries. And I think Jeremy can talk to that existing issue. He was out there surveying it the other day because the delivery trucks out there present huge problems for us.
Morning, Jeremy Alshouse, parking manager. So we haven't gone too far with anything new. Looking at stuff that was already done, as Director Gandy had said, looking at the old garage. There's a lot of considerations to be made here. There need to be a stormwater vault, the utilities where they are, the fuel tanks, and all that. I did hear, I wasn't here at the time, but I heard that the aesthetics of it were a problem. Nowadays, with facade work and stuff like that, they can make a very beautiful looking thing. We can also, I was thinking preliminarily as part of a study, if we're going to study it further, have them mock up a design. This is what it would look like coming over the bridge, so you'd see. I mean, how much you're going to lose with that, we don't know. We're kind of like still guessing a little bit. But as far as those other locations you mentioned, when I first came here with the previous city manager, he was kind of pushing towards this, so we looked at it a little bit preliminarily at that point, and then there was just no push to go forward. But now we seem to have the need is there. As far as the size of it, I mean that would be determined in a study.
Well, you want it to be efficient, obviously.
As efficient as possible.
So it has to be big enough to do that. And then the other issue is making certain that it's servicing the marina, because you're also going to get beach patrons when they find out there's a nice new parking garage across from Pier 60. There's going to be obviously some push and pull on that.
Right. To that exact point, I mean, currently it's roughly 350 spaces in the garage, in that lot currently. 6 months out of the year, we sell 300 permits for the folks that work out of that area. So if everybody showed up to work, they only got 50 spaces left. So that's one of the reasons that we're seeing, people screaming about parking, because then one of those big dinner cruises shows up with a boat full of, folks that want to go out. There's quite frankly no room for them. So a garage does present us with some good opportunities to take care of the staff that works at the marina and a contingent of patrons.
Let's assume that the Bluffs passes and we also build the Peace Memorial Garage. What will be left in the parking fund?
So, I did have some preliminary conversations with the finance director, not to put him on the spot, but not much. We'd have to come up with some unique ways to
well, you
possibly
can bond it. It's going to be a profitable parking garage.
Correct.
I'm not worried about that. But there isn't going to be any ready money.
No.
Okay. Mr. Jennings, what are you hoping for out of this conversation this morning before we go into additional questions? Because we're not going to approve a parking garage today. We're not, we've got this on consent, but I'm not real clear what we're hoping to accomplish.
Well, I think what we're really trying to do here is make sure the public is aware of these discussions, and also to make sure that the council is very aware of everything that we've been working on for the last, well, at least I've been working on for the last 11 months with all of you, but they've been working on it long before that, with the exception of the parking structure. So what we're trying to get out of this is making sure everyone is aware of what we probably will be proposing. But at the same time, we're looking for some direction from you as to whether we should move forward in this direction with kind of conceptual ideas and designs, and not approving anything today or Thursday, but that we should take a look at what really the future is ahead of us.
I don't think we should dumb this project down. I mean, I think if we do, we'll regret it down the road, we'll fix things, it'll be more expensive to do so. I think you do it right the first time, personally. Other questions, comments? Councilmember Albritton?
I kind of feel exactly the same way. You know, when I was a kid, I used to go to the precursor of the Clearwater Marine Aquarium there called Sea-O-Rama, and it was located in the Marina building. And, you know, that's a historic marina. It's been there so long. And we've had talks about this before over the years. We do a lot of talking. And I know it's a complicated project, and Eric, you and I have talked about, you know, what did you get yourself into here? But I like what I'm seeing. I think you guys are on the right track. I think we ought to do it right from the beginning and not cut corners on it, because, first of all, as you guys have said, this will be a profitable venture. Just like all the other stuff we're talking about that's in the works right now in Clearwater, things are happening here, and I don't want to take away anything at this marina. I understand that the utilities, one of my questions first was, is the utility under the sidewalk, is that going to be hit first along with the seawall?
So the repairs are going to require them to go, if we just do the repair model, would require them to attack that seawall. The utilities run under there. So I think from an engineering perspective, Nicole can speak to what they'll have to do to access the utilities. But we're talking, you know, from Duke's main lines down through the marina. So it's a massive undertaking.
So another question I have related to that is, because I can't see it in my head, how are you going to take care of the fishing fleet if you're taking a seawall and taking their sidewalk? Or I know that Ed before was talking about a mooring field or something, but I never could grasp how that was going to happen.
So, as Nicole said, we have a construction manager waiting on deck, and part of their proposal, a significant part of their proposal, was to accommodate the fleet and phase this project. So it's going to be a logistics headache, but we're going to be moving them around within the marina. They're not going to be conducting business out of their existing locations once we're underway. So it's going to have significant impact. There's no way around that. Back to my trailer park analogy. But you know, we are determined to make our best effort to move them around as we phase this throughout the project to accommodate them. But yeah, the sidewalks have to come up. The seawall cap has to be elevated. There's a lot of things that have to occur. And if you look at the master plan design, one of the reasons that the parallel floating docks are there is to allow for a later seawall replacement. So to do a seawall now, you don't jackhammer the old one out, you build it seaward of the existing one. So that's why the master plan incorporates this layout with a gap between the parallel floating docks and the existing seawall, and doesn't allow for the timber dock structure, because you would have to come in and tear it all out again to replace the seawall. So that's what got us thinking about this, should we do the seawall now component. And, it's a mixed bag, because this model gives us full resiliency for sea level issues, because it floats, the whole thing floats. Whereas the timber dock limits that, and we have to have elevation changes throughout. And I'll give you an example. We have some vessels that have 6 feet of freeboard, and then we have other vessels that have floating structures within their existing docks to accommodate the lower freeboard of 18 inches. So, Nicole had some sketches for us, and there's some problems with the timber dock in that you have a bunch of elevation changes to accommodate different user groups. If it's a little floating tiki hut, they've got to be very close to the surface versus one of these large fishing vessels that, they've got a gangway to get into the vessel. So, as far as resiliency, I believe the floating system provides the best option there. But in terms of what we see, how our commercial fleet operates, and how some of them, use our structures to pivot off of and maneuver their vessels, concrete may be problematic. Now, Nicole and I have talked about that, about addition of, some triple pilings and things like that. So, to me, the seawall is critically important, whether we go back with timber or the parallel floating. I think the seawall is a component of this. It's just, it blows the budget. And that's the crossroads we're at. Do we do the seawall again in 10 years, which relegates us to this model? There is no timber dock replacement for the commercial fleet doing a seawall in 10 years. Because you don't want to tear it all out, what you just put in 10 years. That makes no sense. So, that's probably the biggest question of the day, is, the sentiment on that component, which is pretty critical to me in terms of operations.
Don't we have seawall replacement in Penny?
Yeah, we have a seawall replacement.
We don't
fund.
right now? We used to, so we don't have it. It's been pulled. All right. Vice Mayor?
Well, thank you for that presentation. I told the mayor as you started, I said, boy, Mr. Gandy's got his hands full, 2 major projects. I would, from what information I have now and how I've operated, I would support, along with the mayor, doing it right and doing the parking and doing the seawall all at once. And I'm certainly supportive of a public-private partnership as well. I just, if you're going to tear something up and do it, just do it to the best of your abilities at that time. And if we need to have a bond or something, I don't see a problem with that. I had a couple of questions. I'm on the project progress slide. I just assume BPRC is like Building Project Review Committee. Is that right? Did I get that right? For what we've already done, the completed tasks? I think so.
Yeah, that's like the pre-application meeting
Yeah.
with the city to.
Okay. And then with the environmental permitting and studies that you've kind of already done, do you anticipate any challenges with that?
The geotechnical data for the dredge material, we had dredge material sampling done as part of that. We know that typically, maintenance type dredging doesn't usually result in great material, but this is particularly bad. So we, in the sense that it's difficult to handle because it's mostly water.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what we identified as a risk out of the field work. Definitely from some of our general site assessments, it is going to be complicated to do the utility replacements, but I think we have some good plans and ideas on actually going landward of the sidewalks and bringing the utilities in at isolated locations onto the docks so we're not mixing and intertwining with the existing utilities, which are all located in multiple eras of construction right behind the wall. So those would be the 2 things that I would highlight.
Okay. I didn't know about being able to build out over the water, if there were some, restrictions that are different than 42 years ago or whatever we're doing things.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten more stringent to build out over the water in general, so maintaining the 165 slips was a permitting decision as well, because permitting additional slips is more challenging. The fuel building, we're proposing as a floating fuel building, that is gonna require a waiver from the county, but since you have an active and operational building out there that is, defined and has a user, it's a use that is justified over the water, then the county is, said that we can apply for a waiver for that. But that's, the other stuff was actually not necessarily permitted through the county or through the other regulatory agencies, and so that's where some of the challenges are coming in on the overwater structures that are out there right now.
On the next slide, where we have the Marina market study, you've got the market average lease rate is $19 per foot per month, and on another slide, a couple down, I think, you said we're below market, but what are we at, do you know? Like, why don't we start charging more like right now?
$13.
We're 13?
And I can't find the situation anywhere else in the state of Florida. The commercial fleet is charged by passenger.
Here?
Yes. It's a really antiquated model. The nearest one I could find that was close to that is Key West, which is quite a bit of activity out of there for the commercial fleet. It's per foot, $32 a foot for a commercial vessel, plus $1 per passenger per day.
Okay.
So, I mean, that definitely, we have to revisit that. It's just a terrible time to have those conversations when we were talking about tearing up your marina. So that's for future discussion, but it has to be adjusted at some point because it's inconsistent.
And then one of the things you've mentioned a couple of times throughout here, and I've gleaned a couple of insights, but the comparison and features of the floating docks versus the fixed timber docks, and are those fixed timber, can they be a composite like Trex, or are they actual wood that rots, or when you say timber, it's wood, it's not just manufactured to look like?
It can be decked with anything, so absolutely it could be an exotic wood grain or a composite type material.
But we're talking about the pylons are...
Yeah, the actual piles and substructure, as I'd refer to it, and framing elements would generally be timber, because the composite doesn't have the strength. It would need to be, you would look into glue lamp systems and stuff, but they still do house timber.
Okay. And then the vendors just want it for stability. When it's wood, right, versus the floating. Because, one of the things they said was they wanted fixed boat slips, right? So.
Well, it goes right up to the wall, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, what's the problem with the floating if it's more responsive to sea level?
Nicole can speak to it too, but a lot of the complaints I get is loading and staging 100 passengers are getting ready to get on this thing. Can that many people get on a floating system? When some of them come with large catches, they put 2,000 pounds of fish on the fixed timber. Can they put that on the floating system? And then maneuvering. Again, when you maneuver some of these larger vessels, a lot of them will come in and actually pivot off the existing pilings and then use the thrust to kind of maneuver the boat around until they can get into the slips. I suspect that's a component of it as well, just in some of the conversations I've had. So those are probably kind of the big three. I'm sure that there's others that'll...
Floating is probably cheaper, right?
It's not.
It's not?
They're very comparable, actually.
Okay.
A fixed concrete structure, which would be your lowest maintenance and longest service life option, is substantially more expensive than that. But the timber fixed is, you're going to need a semi-robust timber structure here. In some cases, timber can be cheaper, but I think that it will be pretty comparable.
Okay. The next slide talks about that market marina study as well. You say fuel sales are a significant portion of the marina's revenue. Who sets those prices? And, can we increase those?
So we have an ordinance that we call around every week, and we find the market average, and that's how we set our prices. So Mike is on the phone every week calling a bunch of marinas, and that's exactly what we do.
And that's part of an ordinance that we can't jack up the prices.
We can change it.
Yeah.
Back when we talked about doing that, you can just
Oh, I can imagine.
expect that there'll be a bunch of people crowing in the audience, and we tried to find a reasonable compromise to be competitive and yet still make money.
Okay.
And that's the challenge. So any of these things, any rate increase above 10%, you guys have to make that decision. Anything under 10%, Mr. Jennings can make it. Fuel is ordinance-based and so on.
And we also started to have people truck in fuel, did they not?
Oh,
When it
that's
was
not-
above?
Yeah.
So they were having big tankers come and fill up the large boats. And
And
that
we-
was
we-
one of the unintended consequences of what occurred.
Yeah, I had those conversations as well.
On the outreach commercial tenant survey, so this is what the Screamer and the Pirate Ship and all those guys. So I'm just speaking from my experience here. I don't have a boat at this marina, but I walk by it, I drive by it every day, and I try to bike by it, but I can't bike. Generally, I have to get off my bike and walk it because it is so congested. And if you're looking for any direction, it's my personal opinion that while I get that vendors want to have a kiosk right next to the Pirate Ship or anything like that, I think it's just a change in culture to have a central location to buy your tickets for whatever you're going to do and not have any of them around Coronado where it is the worst bottleneck in the entire city. And it's not safe. It's just not safe to be right there next to the curb. And I know we have a little bit of a, what are they, like a ledge? What do you call that? Next to the road where people sit on it as they're waiting to get on the pirate ship. But it's just totally unacceptable to have that maintained with those kiosks there, in my opinion. And I was thinking, part of my notes is, you could have little painted footprints or anchors or directionals, like walk over here and this is where you buy your tickets and come on back. I mean, I think it's just getting used to something like that, but it is so tight there. And I don't think you have a lot of space to go either way, that changing those kiosks is a big deal. And then, this is just kind of the notes for the outreach commercial tenant survey. I have the commercial tenants did not have any commentary about the crowding of patrons on Coronado. They didn't mention that at all. About safety concerns, about nowhere for multimodal transit on this highly popular stretch of the beach. And if we're looking at also, another part of it is going down towards, the Sand Key Bridge, is those sidewalks are essentially unusable. When you have trees in the center of a sidewalk, they're only like 4 feet, trees or a lamp post. But if we can keep this part wider, to me, if you're looking for my 2 cents, those are my 2 cents about that. Also, so the West Promenade Plaza area, so I'm on this slide where we've got a depiction, but again, driving through the roundabout, when we have a heavy rain event, it's flooded. And I think you talked about, in the proposal, bringing that parking lot up to the same level as the retail. Because right now there's like a step down into the parking lot, right? And so I'm thinking, if it's all level, that means any water that accumulates there is going to be gushing onto retail more? Is that right? Or do you think? Or, because we've got street curbs, but again, you don't have anywhere for the water to pool in the parking area before it'll gush onto,
So part of that is a byproduct of sea level.
Yeah.
So if there's nowhere for rainwater to go, because you got an extreme high tide and the hydrostatic pressure keeps it on the street. So that's part of the problem there. When I mentioned raising something, that's a seawall cap has to come up, and I think it's like 18 to 24 inches by.
And I'm all right with that, but I thought I read something in here that you were going to raise the parking.
I think that was the seawall.
Is
cap.
that-
We
okay.
are not at this time planning to do significant drainage improvements to the site because this is an outdated storm system, and really this is intended to be a marina project and a waterfront element. And so any significant changes, raising raising anything up by a substantial amount. We're hoping to get the sidewalks up a few more inches, but that would trigger a site-wide drainage permit. And so should the parking garage move forward into consideration or something, that would be one element of it, is addressing the whole site together, because we're not going to get any more than a sidewalk with an exemption or with a minor permit.
Well, and I think along with the philosophy of doing it right, spending the money and doing it right, at some point, somebody's got to look at the drainage issues as well, because they are pretty significant there when you have a big event, a rain event. The other thing is, and this is, standard operating procedure, when we have these shade structures, or if we're going to relocate the kiosks to a central location, whatever we're going to do, I hope that we would incorporate solar on all those things and build them so that they would accept solar. This little guy down here, looks pretty, but it looks kind of wavy, that maybe it wouldn't have a solar panel on it. And let's see, what's this one?
The intent of shade structures is that they either need to be canvas and removable, something that can be easily removed in a storm, or they need to be designed for the building code. And so right now we are thinking more on the canvas side with the lighting and things that can be removed, and then you just have the framework remaining for that. If you guys are strongly interested in a solar type structure like that's over at the St. Pete Pier, that's not currently planned, but we could have some of those discussions. It's difficult to incorporate some of that over water onto floating structures, but on land into fixed areas, that's a potential.
I think that'd be great to get some.
We do plan to have as much solar lighting as can be supported. Their EV parking spaces are planned as well. And as we move forward, we'll continue looking at the feasibility of incorporating solar into the buildings.
And then I just wanted to be clear on the value engineering alternative 1. It says remove fuel office and reduce footprint of fuel docks. That doesn't mean like we're going to remove access to fuel. It's just like relocating it somewhere.
She's trying to take away my fuel service building.
I need to make sure he didn't like this alternative.
Okay, but there's still fuel offered.
Yeah, there's an overwater fuel building right now, and that if there isn't that, there would need to be some shade structures or something for an attendant, but we're looking at pretty much just taking away and skinnying up everything we could while still keeping 165 operational slips.
Okay. I think that was it. There was, well, this is just kind of I guess this is just more towards our city manager, John, is we haven't upgraded or renovated in 42 years, so now is the time to pay up. So I would so at some point, when things slow down a little bit, is just to have an overview of where we're lacking as a city in maintaining things, so that we're not hit with things are really falling apart.
Vice Mayor, you had mentioned that, within the month, and we've already started that analysis of capital investment into infrastructure and so forth, so we'll have that.
Okay, great.
Councilmember Teixeira.
So I would like to formally offer my support to do this right. I'm in agreement with Councilman Beckman, Albritton, and Mayor Hibbard. This is an area that's deteriorated beyond acceptable measures or standards. The idea that electricity has to be shut off, to me, is unacceptable. So if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. We're basically paying for not maintaining it over the last 40 years. And I think that the parking structure might be aesthetically unpleasing, but it is necessary, and we need to do this right. And I just wanted to be, go on record saying that I'm in support of that.
Councilmember Bump.
I too am in support of both of those aspects. Do it right, and parking is essential. So that structure is very much needed. Is it possible to mix the floating docks with the fixed, so that the larger vessels do have a fixed dock to go to? Or is that just not possible?
If we do the seawall now, yes, and that's another exercise I put them through was to take a look at that and see if we took care of the seawall now, could we come back in? And one of the things about, I think it gives you a little more flexibility of design in terms of angles and things when you're not dealing with prefab concrete floating structures. So it gives them a little bit more latitude.
Remind me again why we wouldn't do it now, because it seems to make sense to just get it done now.
It was about money. And I suspect it was about money when they conceptualized this project years ago.
Are there any grant opportunities, since this is a highly tourist?
Well, we could go to our legislators and certainly try to get in next year's budget. Would be something that would be worthy. The other thing that we could look at is going for TDC money, because this certainly is a tourist attraction, and with Clearwater being the 800-pound gorilla on generating tourist tax, I think it's a worthy project.
Agreed.
We will be pursuing a grant next summer related to the transient dock and fuel dock on the far east end, which could be upwards of $1.2 million. So, I mean, not insignificant for the scope of the project, but helpful nonetheless.
So seeing Ian, and I mean, some of the floating docks, literally the poles weren't tall enough with the storm surge. Is that something that is taken into account? I mean, I know the taller the poles, it's a little less attractive, but I think we'd like to keep the docks in place.
Yes, and honestly, a couple extra feet isn't as visually damaging as you think it would be. We did a marina in New Orleans a couple years ago where the DFE was plus 17, and so a few feet higher than it is here, and I think it's still a nice looking marina, and we absolutely take the mindset of the worst thing you can have to a series of floating docks is for them to float off the top and into each other, because that adds loading to all of the follow-ons. So yes, that's part of the considering planning for sea level rise on top of the planned flooding.
And Eric, you mentioned that some of the tenants didn't want the cement docks because, we can fix the wood docks. Do we not charge some of the tenants if they're damaging their environment?
It's part of their permit. The problem is when they hit a piling and it snaps off, and there's about a third of the piling left because it's rotten inside, I can't in good conscience charge them for that. With a new marina, certainly, you almost approach it like a triple net lease where if they damage it, and we have those provisions now, but we really, it's in such bad shape that if they hit something and a piling snaps and we go look at it and there's none of it left, we don't charge them for it, or we split it with them. So it's something that, yes, in our permits, I'm going through all that now as well, that and ordinance related to all of our permits. So they'll be updated along with the marina. The other thing, too, is that the interesting component from the commercial fleet was they liked the wood docks because it brought the customers closer to them, as opposed to having the floating dock.
Then they have to go down the ramp.
Yeah, so they felt that in the absence of kiosks, that was helpful in just that interaction. So they could be on the back of their boat or somewhere in proximity to their vessel and still communicate without yelling up from a floating dock. I think that was another consideration they had. I will tell you, I did have a tenant come in, a long-time tenant, last week, and we had a good conversation, and they were opposed to, they wanted floating because they didn't want people walking up to their vessel.
Well, I would assume the recreational boats are very happy to be on the interior where not as many people are walking by. Mm-hmm. One last question, Moffett and Nickel. We've had problems with our downtown marina. Mm-hmm. So after the fact, it's misdesigned, and we're going to pay dearly for that. How long have your company been in business?
A little over 75 years.
Okay. Are you familiar with the problems we have down at the downtown marina?
Yes.
We're not going to make that mistake again?
No, we're not.
Okay.
This is a much more sheltered area as well, a lot less boat traffic and stuff coming by. So it is a very different design situation than the other side.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jennings, do you have your guidance?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you both. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute recess. call the October 3rd work session back to order. Everybody,
Use your teacher voice.
11.1.
Authorize a purchase order to Enviro Waste Services Group of Palmetto Bay for emergency and non-emergency pumping and tankering services.
Morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Mike Flanagan, Assistant Director of Public Utilities. The item before you today is for the award for Enviro Waste Services Group Incorporated for the emergency and non-emergency pumping and tankering services to be used throughout the collection system and wastewater facilities. These services are vital for protecting public health. This is a piggyback of a Pinellas County contract. We are recommending the award to Enviro Waste not to exceed $125,000. This is a one-year contract through September 13th, 2023, with an option of 4 one-year renewals. I'm asking for your approval to award, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Vice Mayor?
Just one little one. I just want, on the legislative text, you talk about pumping and tankering services for emergency and non-emergency. What, can you just describe a couple of emergency, non-emergency?
A good example of an emergency is Hurricane Ian. Currently, right now, these services are being utilized south of us. We actually have a contract with Enviro Waste currently. They were on standby. They had five trucks available to us on standby. Had the storm, thankfully it didn't, had the storm hit us. So it's being utilized. So essentially, it would give us the ability to be able to move wastewater from lift stations that don't have power. So we'd be able to get them out of that lift station so it doesn't come out into home, property, whatever it might be.
And then non-emergency?
So non-emergency, if we were to use them at a facility or something of that nature. So a lot of times we'd take our basins offline for routine cleaning and things like that. So we'd be able to utilize these services for that.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Consent?
Yeah.
12.1.
Authorize purchase orders to multiple vendors for the purchase of vehicle parts for heavy and light-duty city vehicles.
Good morning, Perry Conzen, Fleet Manager. The Fleet Division is requesting authorization to purchase vehicle parts from various vendors for heavy and light-duty city vehicles and equipment. Purchases will be obtained through various methods to include single-source, micro-purchases, and piggyback contracts. In addition, the Fleet Division is requesting approval to engage additional vendors as needed in accordance to Code Section 2.5615, with the Procurement Division providing oversight. Competitive quotes will be obtained, and no one vendor will exceed $50,000 in the fiscal year. Any questions?
Any questions? Consent?
Yeah.
12.2.
Approve a one-year lease agreement with 4 one-year renewal terms for certain alarm equipment and associated maintenance and monitoring services with Mayor.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Earl Gloucester, Director of Solid Waste General Services. This agreement would be with Mayor Security. As you know, Mayor provides all security and fire alarm services for all city facilities, and this will be a 5-year agreement. Questions?
Any questions for Mr. Gloucester? Vice Mayor?
So apparently we've had the same alarm company since 1987, and we haven't had a competitive bid process. So I'm just, given the emergence of new competitors and new technologies, we might be able to get better service for less money. Should we go out to a competitive bid?
We've looked at that. We looked at it several years ago, and we looked at it again this go-around. It would actually be prohibitive due to the fact that we lease the equipment that we now have from Mayor. So we have leased equipment in all city facilities. If we go out for competitive bid and somebody else wins, we're going to have to take all that equipment out, shut buildings down to be able to replace that equipment one by one. So working with purchasing, and we spoke with legal also, we worked with our attorney also. We thought it would be better to go negotiate with them and move out this way.
Okay, so once we lock in and we're leasing equipment, it seems like we're kind of locked in there.
We could go the other way, but like I said, we determined that to be prohibitive.
Could we go out and just get the information? Like, just do a little shopping around to find out what the costs are
That's really tough to do when people know what you're doing.
when you're just shopping. I'm just browsing, I'm just browsing.
Can we talk to another municipality that uses a different
Yeah.
vendor and
We could.
find out what they're paying?
Sure.
That might be a easier, more appropriate
Just a
way.
comparative.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, what's the life on the, I guess, the fire equipment that they supply us? I mean, is it over a certain period, and then if you have to renew it, I guess?
They replace it. They've replaced it. This contract has been really interesting. They replaced equipment as you're suggesting, as it ages out, they replace it and upgrade it.
And upgrade it. I was gonna say, because if they had an upgrade, needed to do all at once, that'd probably be the time to do it, but I like the idea of just checking with other municipalities, seeing if we're in line.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Consent?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gloucester. 12.3.
Approve a purchase order to Cliff Berry Inc. of Fort Lauderdale to pump, transport, and dispose of leachate from the solid waste transfer station.
Good morning, Mayor Council. The item before you allows for the collection and disposal of leachate from the solid waste transfer station, which averages approximately 190,000 gallons per year. And this represents about a 15% increase over last year's budget. Available for questions.
Any leachate questions?
I asked him last time,
Some nasty
and I
stuff.
learned, I remember the leachates.
Consent?
Yeah.
12.4.
Authorize a purchase order to Enforcement One Inc. of Oldsmar, Florida for police vehicle upfitting services.
Barry Conslin, Fleet Manager. ITB 46-22 was issued in August 2022, and only one response was received. The ITB purchasing structure was based on specific equipment and installation needs necessary for the upfitting of police vehicles to be purchased in fiscal year 2023 as listed below. The requested authorization for $250,000 annually includes contract pricing for vehicles on the approved vehicle replacement list requiring upfitting, as well as the additional costs associated with damaged or totaled vehicles that require upfitting during the fiscal year.
Any questions? Vice Mayor.
Yeah, and I'm sure I made this comment last time too, there's always this little red flag when there's only one respondent to something. And if this is, up for police vehicles, that's okay. I would think that there's more than one organization or one company that can,
There's maybe one other one.
in the county, just one other
They're
one?
over in Tampa, so.
Okay. I mean, if there's only,
There's other history with that too, so.
okay,
Consent?
sure.
12.5.
Approve an increase in extension on purchase order to Hose and Hydraulics for the purchase of replacement of hydraulic parts and repairs, road service for city vehicles.
Barry Conslin, Fleet Manager. On September 18th, 2017, council approved a purchase order to Hose and Hydraulics in the annual amount of $225,000 for purchase of replacement hydraulic parts, repairs, and services for use on city vehicles and equipment. Piggybacking off the Pinellas County Contract 167-044-QRF, which was to expire on August 10th, 2022. On September 3rd, 2020, an increase to the purchase order was approved, bringing the new annual amount to $325,000. The scope originally was for hydraulic services at the Fleet Division. Subsequently, expanded use of hose and hydraulics to include road service. The additional allocations of funds to the road services incurring more frequently are due to current staffing issues, which allow for mechanics to remain at Fleet to keep up with our demand in the shop. The Pinellas County Contract 167-0444-QRF has now been extended until January 31st, 2023. Authorization is requested to increase our current purchase order by $180,000, bringing a new amount to $505,000 and extending the term to end on January 31st, 2023.
Any questions? I found the lifesavers are better.
Oh, thank you.
Forget this cough drop.
That's from
Garbage.
experience.
It is,
Yeah, no,
firsthand.
You were dying up here.
Any questions?
No,
Consent?
Yeah.
13.1.
Mayor, 13.1 is the exchange agreement with PSTA. This is a finalized contract for the exchange of real estate. I think we've all discussed it on several occasions. No surprises, just two things I want to note. Number one, as directed by council, the contract includes a provision saying that we will not close on the real estate, meaning we won't exchange title unless and until PSTA has shown proof that they have the funding secured to actually build the terminal. They had no objection to that. They feel comfortable with that. Spoken with Councilmember Albritton, also comfortable with that. So I think we're in good shape there. Second, as a reminder to council, we will not, in all likelihood, be able to use the old bus terminal, which we are acquiring potentially for several years until the new bus terminal is connected and up and running at Court and Myrtle. But the agreement is finalized. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, it's done.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, David. On the first page of the legislation text, it says, the CRA has since conveyed the parcel to the city. Did they get paid, the CRA get paid from the city?
Sorry, where are we looking?
It's the second to the last paragraph on the first page of legislation, and it's the last sentence or so. You know, it just talks about how the CRA gave the city that piece of property. Was that just a free, or did the CRA get reimbursed for the value of that property?
That would have been long before my
I know.
tenure, and I don't know the answer to that.
It did.
It did? Okay. Okay. And then the other thing is, so this is about, so the PSTA parcel is valued at $1,800,000, and our properties are valued at $3,600,000. So if we're doing this exchange, you know, the PSTA got a pretty sweet deal.
There's no doubt, this is a very, very favorable deal for PSTA. I mean, I don't want to speak to the reasoning at the time because this predated my tenure. However, I will say that this is different than working with, say, a private developer. I mean, this is an intergovernmental partnership, and so from what's been communicated to me, a lot of the reasoning here was not so much in maximizing dollar values for the city, but more in promoting our intergovernmental partnership with PSTA.
I think part of it was also that this was a portion of our local match, was it not?
Yeah, we needed to have a buy-in from Clearwater in order to acquire the $20 million from the federal government, so this was a great way to do it in valuations, so.
I think, and that's fine, I understand that. I just think going forward, if somebody has their hand out for more money for something, we can already say we've given them a $2 million difference in the value of the land.
I would certainly think, and I would defer to Councilmember Albritton on this, but I don't think there's any additional ask from PSTA at this point on this project.
Do we have an estimate of what the demo is going to be of the existing PSTA site?
Meaning for the old bus terminal, at this point we have not, because or at least I'm not aware of any, because it's so far down the road.
I understand. It's just not going to be free.
No, and we're responsible.
So I just want that to be, out there in the open.
I'll inquire about that, see if they had, I know that I was on the planning committee and we did talk about improvements that were put into the bus station before we went through this whole process. But I'll see if they have some estimates on that. It might be old, have to, update them, but those give us an idea.
Do you think that there would be big environmental issues with that property because we've had the buses on it for years and years?
The one that we're acquiring?
Yeah.
There's no doubt, that could be an issue depending on what it is that we want to build there. Ultimately, if council wants to put something residential there, that's going to be much more of an issue that we're going to have to look at. There could be significant remediation because the environmental standards for residential are very strict. On the other hand, if council envisions a different use that's non-residential, it's less likely that that's going to be a concern.
There was no tank or anything below.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say that it's my understanding there are no tanks, and that's really what causes the environmental review. So just because you have a,
Parking area.
yeah, it's,
Probably fluids have been dropping on
Yeah,
the
but
pavement,
that's-
but unfortunately going into the stormwater, so
yeah.
not necessarily contaminating the ground.
Thank you.
Consent? 13.2 through 13.8 are second readings. Any questions there?
Mayor, if I could, just one thing I want to point out, just briefly on the second readings, with just the order of operation, I believe we have the millage, should have the millage ordinance on there.
It's there.
Okay.
They will appear under administrative public hearings, first item.
Okay, that was what I was going to say, is the millage does have to be the first substantive item discussed. I just wanted to make sure we keep track in terms of order of operation.
This calls on it, right?
It was unusual because of the storm and the
Right.
delay. That was the only reason I just wanted to make sure.
And there have been people questioning whether we were going to have a public meeting on it, but it is by statute that we have to, and we will. So we'll discuss that on Thursday. Mr. Jennings, anything else?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Chief Graham, John Graham, Derek Smith, and the entire emergency operations group for all that they did over the last really 10 days. John did an excellent job of preparing the city. He activated the Emergency Operations Center. We all went into the center to make decisions because at that time, the cone was pointed right at us. It is tragic that it happened to our neighbors in the south, but thankfully it did not come into Clearwater. And so, Chief Graham, I just wanted to recognize you and your entire team, Chief Ellers, everyone who has done such a fantastic job. It's the most impressive operation that I've seen in a long time to prepare the city. So I wanted just to mention that to the council.
We certainly didn't wish the storm on anybody else. We wished it could have gone off into the ocean and dissipated, and our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody south of us. If you want to contribute, certainly the Red Cross, Salvation Army, and other organizations are still taking donations of items and, of course, money. It's going to be a long rebuilding process. It was difficult not to think what Clearwater Beach and many of our low-lying areas would look like today had it hit us directly. So we should be very thankful. Anything else, Mr. Margolis?
I had a couple other things.
Oh, okay.
If that's okay.
Rock on.
Okay, sorry. I say all the time how blessed I am to be able to. Kayleen, can you wait?
Called out.
I say all the time how blessed I am to be able to work with the most amazing group of people. And Kayleen Castle, I just wanted to recognize her. It's been one of the best budget creation experiences. And just recently, the finance director promoted her to budget director. And I wanted to have that recognized by the council.
Now you can leave. Thank you.
And then finally, I just wanted to mention that Jennifer Poyer, who has been our HR director for the last several years, has been promoted to assistant city manager effective Saturday. And so I'm excited to be able to work more closely with Jennifer, and also just want to thank Micah Maxwell for his years of service as assistant city manager. Thankfully, he is not going anywhere, that he's going to continue to work with us on the innovation agenda. And so, but I wanted to recognize Jennifer for her promotion, and I think she'll be a great addition to the city manager's office.
Congratulations to both on your new roles. We look forward to what you're going to do. Billy in the temporary role. Congratulations. Anything else?
No, please, you can go away from me now.
Okay. Mr. Margolis, anything?
Just briefly, the resolution for the emergency proclamation will come before council on Thursday. Because the agenda was already published for today, we didn't have it on today's agenda, but on Thursday, there will be a resolution confirming the emergency proclamation. That's a ministerial item, but that'll be on for Thursday.
All righty. Council discussion items. First up is the city manager and city attorney evaluations. I personally have not had time, because of the storm, to sit down with the manager and the attorney and go through my evaluations with them. I like to do that prior to us speaking up on the dais. I know by charter we're supposed to do it in October. We're coming upon your first anniversary. Mr. Jennings' first anniversary, I believe, will be November 9th?
8th.
9th. I'd love to push it to 1 year and do it in November. If everybody would be comfortable with that, that would give us all time to speak with both of our employees first, which I think is appropriate, and then do the public hearing on it.
I agree with that.
Everyone comfortable with that?
Yep.
Okay. 16.1. These are a little odd, by the way. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh,
we're going to do
numbering?
the proclamation request process.
Okay, 16.1. All right, so as part of my education up here, I'd just like to know what is the overview or process of these proclamations that we sign and stand up and have people say nice things about important things. They're not concrete, measurable things. So one thing that I think about is the proclamation of, Manatee Month or Manatee Week or whatever it was, which I'm all in support of protecting manatees and seagrasses and all that stuff. But number one, I'd like to know, what the procedure is, and can we make those public facing? Can we have a web page that has our list of proclamations? Because when we make a statement about something that we care about or we're committed to, even though there aren't measurables, it's something that I think we need to follow through with when we have, decision items up here that may tie into those proclamations. And so here's an example with that manatee. So we signed the Manatee Proclamation that we all love manatees and we want to help support them and grow their population. At the same time, I'm on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board, and we talk about the loss of seagrass and the loss of quality of water in the Bay region and how manatees are struggling and blah, blah, blah. And then we also have, Coachman Park. And there may be a possibility of more boats wanting to moor at Coachman Park when a concert is going on. And so there have been a number of EAB members, Environmental Advisory Board members, that have wondered about, are we going to restrict that? How much seagrass is there? Should it be protected? And then, so I imagine it coming down to economics. So you have people that come in with yachts and an expectation of putting an anchor out there and listening to a concert where perhaps they're digging up these seagrasses that are supposed to be here for our manatees. So how do all those things connect? If we say with a proclamation that we value X, Y, and Z, and then we have an opportunity to follow through with it on policy, do we do that? Just wanted to,
Councilmember Albrecht.
So, I guess what I'd like to expound on that is the difference between a resolution and a proclamation. I mean, you're proclaiming something is more of a generalized way of thought, but a resolution, you're more resolved to doing something like that. Is that correct?
I think by statute, a resolution is supposed to be an expression of administration. So the resolution typically involves some action by the city, whether it's acknowledging an existing action or giving direction for a future action. But typically the resolution should involve some aspect of city government or city operations, whereas a proclamation, at least I see, as more of a political or social statement. So that's That would be my answer.
Well, how it works is, first of all, we have proclamations that we do for Fire Prevention Month or, whatever it may be, that are internal to the city. The other proclamations that come from, let's say, the Red Cross, they come to my desk, and as long as they are parallel to our policies, then I authorize the proclamation to be done. We get requests for proclamations from all over the country. If it's an organization that does not operate in Clearwater or the Tampa Bay area, we generally do not do a proclamation. But that's really how they all come about. And over time, people have brought new ones that they'd like to, basically highlight what their organization does and, what they're doing that month or that particular week. And that's how they get approved right now.
How would you feel about having them, like, public-facing, like a tab that just is like, this is our running, these are the proclamations we've done in the last, 2 years. I mean, they come up frequently, there's a long list, I'm sure.
Oh, well, this Thursday, I think we've got 4 or something.
Yeah.
4?
Yeah. I mean, just to have it out there,
I don't mind, Joelle.
Before Joelle speaks, I would like to say that those proclamations are listed on the agenda, so they're already public-facing.
Yeah.
And I'll defer to Joelle regarding the public interaction about, I know that we're very intentional now with our website, so placing information that may not be requested. I don't know if there's ever been an interest to look at a list of proclamations, but
I just think, as somebody who's advocated for certain causes throughout my life, if you can find out that a city or an entity has signed these proclamations or resolutions in the past, you can go back and say, hey, you did this. Because I'll tell you, I carry around in my bag, my work bag, the Pinellas County Housing Compact, which we signed. I think almost every municipality in the county has signed. Not a whole lot of meat, but it's something that can be waved around and said, hey, we signed this. What are we going to do to follow through with it? And so people need to know that those things have been signed and what they are and hold people to account.
Joelle Castelli, Public Communications Director. If the question is, can we put the proclamations on the website, the answer would be yes. As Rose said, they're already there attached to the agenda item, but we would need to know that the collective wants us to do that, and it would be very minimal usage from the public.
I understand the minimal usage. And I get that they're public-facing because they're on an agenda, but I mean, that's pretty tedious to have somebody, like, when did we sign that Manatee resolution? I'd have to try to go back. But maybe resolutions that are a little more meaty or meaningful than a proclamation, at least.
resolutions are already available through the Laserfish under resolution.
So you just put it in the search bar, a resolution, it'll come right up, the whole list of them?
And then every year that a resolution is adopted, it's divided by the year, but that is already available.
Okay, just.
And required.
And legally
required, right.
Okay.
Councilmember Bunker.
I actually spoke about this from the podium back in 2000, when the city read off a proclamation after the Concerned Businessmen of America wrote in saying, we're a Los Angeles organization, but we've looked at all the schools across the country, and here in Clearwater we've got an amazing school that should be recognized, the Clearwater Academy. And they asked for a proclamation to be read and 4 copies of the proclamation to be forwarded so they could have one in their office and their this and that. And it was a Scientology front group that was saying, hey, would you say something nice about this Scientology school so we can have you validate this, so that they could then put one of those proclamations in the school and say, you know, the mayor loves us, the city loves us, we do great work. and another went to the L. Ron Hubbard Museum in LA. So a lot of times things get sent in and requested. We just have to make sure we check them and we agree with what we're proclaiming. And I'm sure we've tightened that up enormously.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that education.
Joel, how long would it take to put the proclamations on the website? And then I'm assuming we put an expiration date. I mean, after a year, we take them down, or how much staff time? Is it a burden?
It wouldn't be a huge burden.
Okay.
Probably take 30 minutes after each meeting to post them.
Really? 30 minutes after each meeting?
Not 30 minutes after the meeting ends, we would
Oh,
post
to post them.
It
Oh,
would,
just
like,
add it on.
Yeah, approximately 30 minutes a week to do them.
Clarification, so would it be just the list of the proclamations, or you're looking at linking the actual proclamation? That's different. I don't know if Joelle.
Yeah, I would think a link, hyperlink so you can go read it. I mean, it's one thing to have a title, but like, let's read what the whereas is and all that.
Maybe,
Those are not out there. They are scanned, but it's part of council, so they're not public facing. But Joelle would have an issue with the ADA compliance. That's going to add some more time for staff.
Mr. Jennings, this is administrative. Do you have an opinion?
Well, I would ask at this point to have the opportunity to speak with Joelle in some detail as to, because it's not just this, there are many other requests for the website. And so, as you know, we're undergoing a change in our site, updating, and so I'd appreciate the opportunity just to speak with her.
Everyone comfortable with that? You okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm just going in order, so
That's fine.
we'll do the ARPA.
ARPA, okay. All right, so ARPA funds. So we have, essentially we have 3 buckets that are pretty discretionary. We have the art bucket, we have an education bucket, and we have just a general grant bucket of $1 million each. And the other buckets are, we have like streets and sidewalks, we have broadband expansion, we have CRA, and, I didn't list them all out, but you agree that we kind of have these 3 that are a little more open? And so I wanted to talk about, I don't want to micromanage the buckets, except I want to keep a close eye on these 3 buckets of $1 million each, and how those funds are distributed. And I'd like us to be real, transparent and accountable to our residents about all the buckets. And so I would envision, some kind of a spreadsheet form of columns of let's say we've got the $5 million to the CRA, and we have, the date that it was received. Everybody got our full tranche, last spring or something. And then you can have, a ledger item of, 1.5 million went to this, and this is how and so 1.5 million, where is it going? Here. What's the intended use? Here. And then follow up, if it's appropriate to have follow-up of, look, we made, 300 sidewalk repairs with this money or something, and here's the completion date. So the money got in here, it got distributed here for this purpose, and this is our reporting back of the completion date. I think that's not asking too much as far as being real transparent with our $22.4 million. The other thing is, as we look at those 3 buckets, the 5 of us vote on where that money goes. And so I'd like to have a process that's real fair and transparent about what we are expecting those dollars to go to in a bucket of education, in a bucket of ARPA, or arts, and then in the freewheeling open bucket. And do we want to encourage partnerships with 2 or more service providers who are already out there? Do we want to give priority to Clearwater residents or Clearwater-based organizations if they apply for some, I'm going to call it grant money from those buckets? Do we want to favor those organizations who have a track record and have some demonstrated capacity? Or do we want to award some of them to some young upstarts who have great ideas and want to get something going? They might not have a track record, but they might be located in Clearwater. They might have been dreaming of this for a long time and need a little help. Do we want to, focus on where we can make the most impact with the fewest dollars? Here are a couple examples. I know that the Salvation Army has taken in people. People will call and say, here's an example that I remember from a number of years ago. A family had their car break down, the only car that they had to get to work, and they needed car repairs. And so they, contacted the Salvation Army. They were generous to get them over the hump, fix the car. The family could continue to have an income, and, they weren't at risk of becoming homeless because they didn't have a way to get to work. That's a tiny amount of money that can make a really big difference for families and children becoming homeless. There's also the gentleman named Michael Blue, who's part of the Going Home Coalition right here in Clearwater, who actually pays for transportation tickets, so either a bus or a train, I don't know if he does an airplane, but he will take our street homeless and put them on transportation after he does his due diligence. You've got family, you've got supports in Milwaukee or wherever, I'll buy you a ticket and off you go. And they're off our streets. Hopefully they're going to be successful where their family is and they have supports, and it's cost us minimally to make a huge difference that way. Are those some of the things that we're open to? And so there's, lots of questions about possible parameters. And I know that $1 million sounds like a lot, but when you sit up here or you are in organizations that deal with case management and all that stuff, $1 million is like not a whole bunch. I spoke to Dr. Cynthia Johnson with Pinellas County, and their office provides some grant money as well. And so here's what they do. They send out some kind of a notice about this is the funding that we have available. These are some of the things we'd like to see. The applicants turn in their application. The applications are scored and reviewed by a board. And then they're sent to a committee that reviews the application for the program criteria. And then the staff makes a recommendation to the county manager, Barry Burton, and Barry reviews it, and then Barry makes a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to conditionally approve it, and then they do their due diligence to make sure that this, the numbers line up and that this organization is good to go. So it has a whole bunch of steps to it. It's not just somebody comes and speaks for 3 minutes and has funds allocated. So I think it's important for us to come to an agreement about, and we don't have to agree today, right? But we can start thinking about it. What do we hope to see in those 3 buckets? And maybe staff has already started to propose some things, which is great. And I would also wonder, again, if we go back to the top of the agenda where we had the presentation on DEI, does that want to play? Do we want that to garner some points or be part of the conversation of distribution of those $3 million or so? So that's what I wanted to say about that. The money's sitting there. It's been sitting in there. Some of it's over 2 years. I think that it's been in there, at least a year and a half. It'll be 2 years, I think, in March or something next year. So we want to get it out. But I think we want to get it out to people who will obviously do good things, have the capacity, and will spend the federal money wisely with the most impact.
Well, I'm fine with developing some more criteria around how the money is distributed. I think that ought to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think there ought to be a vision to it with those 3 buckets. Certainly, I think it ought to be to organizations that operate in Clearwater or Clearwater directly benefits. But Mr. Jennings, some thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have been working, staff has been working on criteria and various recommendations in terms of a process, not organizations, but process that we're bringing to you at the next meeting. For instance, Chuck Lean has put together a memo on distribution of the housing funds, recommendations in there. I know that Micah Maxwell has been working on the cultural affairs bucket. Actually, I believe, Rose, you were working on education. Yeah, so there will be recommendations that will be coming to you, and then that will lay out the criteria, and then we'll do something similar to what county's doing, although they have a lot more money, funds.
Yeah. And bigger projects. I mean, these would be smaller, I think, for those 3 buckets. They're kind of smaller projects.
Yeah, I'm just not the biggest fan of a lot of bureaucracy.
Me neither. It is a long, but again, if they're doing a $10 million project, they need to have all that.
Councilmember Tejeda.
So as I understand it, we're going to have different processes for different buckets as it's warranted.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, the Air Park negotiation.
Yeah, Air Park, okay. So, I think we were supposed to have our meetings, our one-on-ones with Mr. Gandy Hurricane Week, so those have been put off. So this might be a little premature, but again, it's just thinking about, it's what I'm thinking about, and I think we need to have a conversation sooner rather than later. And so I think we should provide some direction as Fly USA is beginning negotiations with the city. I don't like to waste anybody's time, and I would rather be, like Mr. Gandy wanted our input on the marine renovation way before we start really discussing, start finalizing things. I think with Fly USA, first of all, there was that possibility of kind of a rush job, because it had to be in before the contract expired at the end of November. And now we have the current operator who said, no, I'll continue to operate as long as you need me to. You don't have to feel that rush. So I think we should have a conversation about where we stand. Ultimately, we approve the operating contract as a body on our priorities for this contract. As Mr. Gandy had said, you're not going to please everybody, which is super fun. But if we have improving safety of operations in the facilities, improving the quality of life for residents, engaging the community more in the air park, like a restaurant, more community-held events there, reducing helicopter traffic, perhaps maybe to only 3 days a week, limiting the hours of operation and then enforcement of that, limiting days for flight school, and then, what about, even if we say if a plane is inactive for a year, they're out. They don't get to renew their contract unless there's some, other circumstances. If somebody's dealing with a health issue or whatever, and they can appeal that decision. But if we have planes out there, and I went out there before this weekend, grass is growing up all around it. You can tell they haven't been moved. So anyway, I think we should give Mr. Gandy a clear indication of what our priorities are here as he goes forward and negotiates them. So.
Mr. Jennings, how would you like to go about this?
So kind of thought a lot about this, and, this is one of those delicate balances that we have between your oversight responsibilities and our ability to kind of negotiate. And so my feeling is that I think that collectively, we've heard your concerns about the air park, and I think Mr. Gandy will certainly take all of that into consideration, but I'd rather not be at a disadvantage in negotiating with kind of everything being set up front by the council, and then but obviously we have to bring this back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that time, you will decide whether this is
reasonable.
Yeah, to the objectives of the city, right? So, but I think the last conversation that you had on the dais, I think gave us a lot of information.
I think going forward, if we had, an issue like this before we go out to RFP, we need to have more conversations on the front end. Because I think the process, I would agree if we have that discussion on the dais when we've already selected somebody to negotiate with, I think we're getting things a little bit backwards. I do think that if the contract comes back and it's unpalatable, then certainly that's going to be the time for the council to weigh in and say, this is not something we're comfortable signing off on. Hopefully, we still are getting those one-on-ones.
So, in terms of the contract negotiations, we're in the process of going back and forth. Legal has it, we've reviewed it. I think everything has an implication. And I've taken, I'd say, everything you mentioned into consideration, as has Fly USA. So the first draft, if you will, incorporates some of these limitations. And the problem is that when you limit a revenue stream, it changes the complexion of the contract. So I think those are the challenges when you talk about adjusting operations. So if you're involved in the operational component and make operational decisions, it has revenue implications. And I think that's the challenge, is finding the balance that allows Fly USA to operate it effectively and to make money off it, because they wouldn't be in the business to try and do it if they didn't want to make some money off of it, and then meets our needs on the operational expense side. I will tell you that throughout this, there is no model that doesn't require capital investment on the city side. And I use the example of, I'm engaging you with a lease on this home, and we walk in and do the walkthrough, and there's a hole in the ceiling. Fly USA is not going to expect to take over with a hole in the ceiling. So those are the nuances to this thing that I think we all have to be wary of, is that I don't think any firm is going to come in and say, I'm going to assume all your deferred maintenance problems and then some. So that's the challenge here, is we have some issues like that. But we're working through them, and I will tell you, just the initial reviews and the back and forth with legal, we've identified some of the very things that you're speaking of. So Fly USA has actually incorporated some of those, to the extent that they mention the landings. For the purpose of this lease and the term of the lease, we don't want the landings, and we're not interested in them. So they're forward thinking, and they took notice of what you guys were saying too, if that's helpful.
Councilmember Shannon.
You know, looking back, I'm thinking of improving the process, and especially in big ticket items like this, perhaps the council should be involved in the RFP process, at least having our input in the crafting of the RFP instead of this sequence. I think it would be beneficial, especially with important ticket items like this, instead of having our feedback afterwards.
So I can't speak to that. That's not my kind of thing. But what I'll tell you is that, yes, I mean, certainly input, but we do, I don't know, probably hundreds of these things a year. Which ones do you want to be involved in? But that's not for me to answer. I see a problem with that. And I hate to say there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, you get to a point of saturation. With this air park, there's no shortage of ideas. I think all of you have a pro forma so certainly we did a pro forma before all of this, and recognized early on that it may not be the best interest for us to try and run it. It may be a break-even proposition with significant capital investment. Well, that pro forma, while I think they spent a lot of time doing it, they didn't have all the information. You cannot run that air park with personnel costs of $300,000 a year. That it doesn't work. So there's no shortage of ideas, and that's the challenge. I'm saturated with ideas right now. And that's not to critique your ideas, but that's the reality of this. It's that everybody has an idea for that place, and they are at opposite ends of the spectrum. So we're working within the confines of the Fly USA proposal to try and find the best balance.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah, you know, the way I look at this is you can't legislate the market. I mean, you may have all the ideas in the world, but the market's not going to go for it. It's not going to be a good idea. And I think what you did was the right thing. Put it out, see what kind of ideas come back from the market. And now we're getting into the weeds now to see, with all the talks we've had about all the different interest groups, what we need to do to make a balance and still make it marketable, make it work in the market. So I'm comfortable with how it's gone so far, and hopefully it'll end up with something that works.
Well, I think I'm fine with that as well, Councilmember Albritton, but I can also tell you, I think we know which RFPs are going to have more interest than others. I don't think we want to get into most RFPs. This was an obvious one, I think, to an extent. I think when you deal with the waterfront, that's going to be something that tends to really get people's attention. Some of them aren't RFPs, but, when we redo a major park, not Coachman, but even like Del Oro or something like that, those are times that we know we're going to get a lot of feedback, and there probably needs to be a little bit more legwork on the front end so that we can avoid issues down the road. That's all I'd say. I mean, this isn't specific to you, Eric. You're just being thrown into the middle of it,
No, obviously I take responsibility for the issuance of the RFP. I mean, this isn't Eric or finance. What I've found is that there have been a lot of these projects that haven't been addressed in many, many years. And so, what we're trying to do is certainly expedite and address core issues that have been left to linger for some years. I tend to agree with Councilmember Albritton that, we certainly could come to the council in advance, but I do think that there's the value of getting ideas from the private sector, in this case specifically, that does animate a conversation from the dais with all of you. And so either way will work with us. I really would prefer not to get into the council writing the RFP, but
No,
making
I don't think
recommendations.
anybody anticipates that. I think what you want to look for, in my opinion, is threshold issues.
Mm-hmm.
Can I clarify? I'm not asking to write, draft, wordsmith. What I'm trying to say is, with a situation like this where I was inundated with opinions, and this is a hot topic, I would have liked for us to be involved earlier. To sort of, instead of having the RFP filled out and everything and then just get, I think, especially with this case, it would be beneficial if we would have input earlier. Now, that's not to say that I'm, I feel like you inherited this huge challenge and you're getting thrown under the bus, and I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to, come up with options for the future, how we learn through this process. But I'm not talking about micromanaging. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm really against that. But in the same token, I got inundated with communications from various people. And looking back, I think it would have been beneficial if we were involved. I'm not saying every case, but certainly I think it's obvious that this, if I'm mentioning, this would be fitting the bill. This would be one where perhaps our input earlier would have been beneficial. That's all.
Anything else? Yes, Councilmember Bunker.
Well, we did, in choosing who we wanted to run the airport, we did say that we want the neighborhood concerns to be addressed. And there was discussion of fewer helicopter rides around there and, limiting hours in some respect. I don't know if we can put all those things in a contract, but I think we made it clear that we wanted the neighbors to be respected and a part of this. And it sounded like they were more than willing to be working toward that goal.
Yeah, and some of that's in there, but what we have to do is then weigh that and see the financial implications of saying 20% of your revenue from this activity goes away. What do the numbers look like then? So it's an exercise.
Any future items to be added? Councilmember Beckman.
I wanted to give you guys an update on that special NOFO for unsheltered homeless. We had some projects that came in and scored them. We scored them on Wednesday? Yeah, I think we had to score them on Wednesday because we had a requirement for sunshine law. So there needs to be we need to change something somewhere along the lines that if there is a state of emergency declared in your region, that those HUD meetings can be like postponed until the hurricane's gone. But anyway, we scored them on Wednesday, and I just wanted to share with you some of the information that came in. It was interesting. So that's all for the future.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah. I think maybe it would be a good idea to talk to FDOT and see about maybe doing something with our causeway. We talked, some of the things that we saw down south with the roadways being eroded, like from underneath with no curbing. Our causeway has no curbing. I thought we had curbing in the center and none on the side, but we have none anywhere. And since it is the main roadway to our beach, I'd like to see, and I'll talk to them first and see if they've got money available to maybe do some curbing out there for, in the future, if a storm like that hits us, I don't want to look like them. I mean, at least I want to be able to get on the barrier islands, so. And then the other thing I would maybe ask too is that we've talked a little bit about doing something with the, as my dad used to call it, the cave, all the growth that is on both sides of the causeway. And I understand some of the people on Island Estates really like that because it gives them a buffer with the traffic and the noise. But what about the south side? We haven't opened there. I'd like to maybe start that first. And I'm not saying remove it all, but get it cut down where you have a view of the water as you're going to the beach. I think would be beautiful. We've talked about it for years. And maybe people would look at that and go, it's not such a bad idea if we do it on the north side too. But maybe have some discussion about that up here on the dais and see where it goes.
Happy to have staff give a report. It is not inexpensive.
No, I know.
We looked at it at one point, to get a permit to trim mangroves. They grow back really fast. But I'm happy to talk about it. But I think probably 06, 07. It was before the Great Recession. It was well over $250,000 back then, and that was only the south side.
Oh, really? Just the south side?
Just the south side. So, can't imagine what it would be today. And they were talking about doing the best thing I could describe it as is almost like dental molding.
Really?
Oh, right. Well, there's a lot of things that are growing there besides mangroves.
There's a bunch of invasive
Isn't there an invasive
species.
species as
yeah,
well?
there are. It was cleaned out at one point, but they come back. Especially the Brazilian peppers and whatnot. Okay, anything else? All right, well, thank you all. We will see everybody Thursday.